we've dealt with things that are disappointing mitzad the Gashmiistic world, right? That we've now dealt with extensively. The next question that we are having is going to be, what about if the sadness is not coming from the physical world, but actually my own spiritual pursuits? So once again, we're going to use the Alter Rebbe's way of looking at things from a different perspective and changing the way we view what is happening in our lives. So we are 4 lines from the bottom, page Lamed Gimel. Here we go. However, let's say instead of the depression coming from things of this world, now we're saying that the depression is coming from Mile de Shemaya, spiritual things. So we need to get some advice as how to get rid of it. Right? New plan. Right? We've already discussed Gamzu L'Teiva. We talked about that for about 3 classes. Now we're going to be talking about a whole different story. Having said that, he says, he digresses for a second. And he says, Ein tzarich lomar b'shas avoda. For sure, we don't have to give the following advice for when a person is actually in the midst of his avoda, which means in the middle of learning Torah, or the middle of davening, or something like that. That we will deal with in chapter 28. We're not going to deal with that here. That for sure we know that what should tzarich la'avodas Hashem b'simcha v'tuv leivav. That we know you have to serve Hashem with happiness, with your full heart. We have to be completely involved in a very, very joyous way. That goes without saying. You might get upset about something. Okay, we'll talk about that in chapter 28. Let's not deal with that right now. Instead, what are we going to deal with right now? Next page 66. Let's say a person is a businessman, right? He's involved in the world. He's in the middle of his day. He's working on his computer. He's deciding to buy this stock, to sell this stock. He's deciding if what to do with this, what to do with that, etc., etc. So he says like this. Okay, he's sitting there in front of his computer. He's trying to work on this project, and all of a sudden he starts to think, what I did last night. I did a big avera. I did a big sin. I did the wrong thing. Or yesterday, I was supposed to learn Torah with my friend, and I stood him up. I didn't go. I should have gone. Or he does something negative. He's in the middle of his day. He's mamish in the middle of working on a project. His boss expects his project by 4 o'clock, and he's in the middle of working on it, and all of a sudden he starts thinking to himself how he really needs to be a better person. He needs to be a better person. So you could say to yourself, that's so amazing. This guy is so holy that even in the middle of his workday, this is what he's thinking about, and this is what's getting him down, and he's all upset. How can I be a person that did this sin and did that sin and did this wrong and did that wrong? I have to become better, and he's all upset about that. Wow, a tzaddik, such a good guy. So he says, think again. The Alter Rebbe says, wrong. That is the wrong approach. A person has to know, once again, remember we're looking at the playbook of the opposite team. The opposite team is my Yetzer Hara, right? It's my animal soul. What's the goal of the animal soul? The goal of the animal soul, get this guy depressed. Once he's depressed, he's going to go after all of his taivas, all of his desires of the physical world. He's going to, pass the chocolate. I need more chocolate. I need more of this. I need more drugs. I need more alcohol. I need more whatever it is. I need to watch, this type of video and that type of video. That's the goal of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, we are at a war here. We're in the middle of a war. And the Yetzer Hara knows how to play this game very, very well. And his goal is get this guy depressed, get this guy sad, get this guy diving into all of these taivas. So now, the Yetzer Hara comes along and says to him, he's in the middle of working on a project. Do you remember that sin you did in 1932? Right? the point is what? You think that this is a positive thing. You think, wow, look at me, I'm thinking about the sins that I did, I'm thinking about how I could be better. This is not the right time. The Yetzer Hara realizes that he can get you now. And you have to decide who's setting the agenda of my life. That's the question. Who is setting the agenda of my life? The Yetzer Hara says, right now, let's get you upset, let's get you depressed, let's get you anywhere. The truth is, however, thinking about different sins that I did over the course of my lifetime and thinking about how I could be better is a very holy and positive thing. It just depends when and how. In other words, there's a time and place for everything. At 3:30 in the afternoon, in the middle of my workday, that is not the time or the place for this. That's what a person has to realize. And the fact that it's popping into my head right now, I know that this is a trick of the Yetzer Hara. That's what's going on here. When is it supposed to happen? In the middle of the night, when I'm ready to say Kriya Shema, and I think a little bit about Hashem, and I think a little bit about my soul, like we were talking about in Derech Chaim. We have our second, God willing, we'll have our second shir tonight in Derech Chaim, right, at 9 o'clock. And we're thinking about how the soul is connected to the soul above, and recognizing that, when I do these bad things or these wrong things, how I'm impacting not just the soul down here, but the soul above, and impacting Hashem, and you realize, in other words, there is a time and space for everything. And the way it works is that I have to prepare myself. I have to get myself into the right frame of mind. I have to recognize who it is that I'm doing damage to. I'm doing damage to Hashem. I'm doing damage to my soul. That's what I'm doing damage to. It's not my arrogance that's at stake here. That's not what we're talking about. It's not my ego, right? It's my soul. In order to do that properly and in a holy way, that's for a Kriya Shema meditation. So now, when you feel that bitterness, like we talked about in the beginning of the chapter, after you're saying Kriya Shema, or during you're saying Kriya Shema, or Tikkun Chatzos, or something like that, that's very healthy. And it catapults me to move forward and to do better things and to live my life in a better way. Getting a little bit of musar, let's say, whether it's from myself or from someone else, is not a terrible thing. It doesn't hurt, right? Adarabba, makes me into a better person. But there's a time and space for everything. That's the point that we're trying to bring out here. And so the fact that it's happening in the middle of the day, I know it's not coming from the right side. It's coming from the Yetzer Hara. And that's what he says here. Shehu tachbulus hayetzer. This is the trick of the Yetzer Hara. Kedei lahapilut, in order to make you fall achar kach b'taivas chas v'shalom, into all your taivas. Because when a person feels bad about something and they get depressed, what do? They want to make themselves feel better. So how do they make themselves feel better? They go and they eat ice cream and chocolate, and they smoke drugs, and they drink more alcohol, and they whatever it is, right? To get them to feel better. That's the goal of the Yetzer Hara. That's what we do. Because if it wasn't that way, where is the true upsetness coming from? Where does true upsetness come from? It comes machmas avos Hashem. It's supposed to come because I love Hashem so much, and I appreciate Hashem so much. And when I recognize that energy, that I love Hashem so much, and I appreciate Hashem so much, so then I realize that when I do the wrong thing, I'm hurting my relationship with Hashem. That's where it's supposed to come from. But in order to get there, it's not a bumper sticker that I just read a line and then all of a sudden I feel that way. It's a relationship. And I have to think about it and I have to develop it. Or to have a fear of Hashem. Where does it come? Be'emsa askav? Right now, in the middle of writing this report, in the middle of trading stocks, in the middle of whatever it is that I'm doing for a living, that's not the right time. And obviously it didn't come from my understanding of my relationship to Hashem. So where did it come from? It must have come from my Yetzer Hara. That's the bottom line. That's how it works. avoda b'talmud Torah or b'tefillah. Now, if a person falls into this depression at the time of his avoda, namely in learning or in davening, ubein shenafla lo shelo b'shas avoda, or if it came in at a different time, not at the time when he's doing avoda. Zos yasim el libo. This is what you should put into your heart. Ki ein hazman grama. Person has to know that right now is not the proper time for this. It's not the proper time. It's not the proper space. This is not when it's supposed to be. Ke'etz la'atzvus emisi. This is not the right time for this. Afilu l'daigas avonos chamuras chas v'shalom. Even if I made tremendously terrible sins. Okay, I did the wrong thing. I made mistakes in my life. I did bad things. But again, I have to be the one to set the agenda. The agenda is that there's a specific time and place where I should be thinking about this. Right now is not that specific time and not that specific place. And the point is to make sure that who is setting the agenda of my life. Is it my Yetzer Hara or is it my godly soul? That's the point that we're trying to bring out here. Okay? So it's a matter of realizing, looking, it's like a doctor. You go to the doctor and you present certain symptoms. And when they look at those symptoms, they say, oh, well, if you have this, this, and this, we're going to take this test and we think it could be X. It looks like you have strep throat. Oh, so let's take a look, because you're presenting this way. And if you're presenting this way, so let's take a flu test. And if you're presenting this way, right? In other words, there are symptoms. So the same thing is happening here with us. There are symptoms here. What are the symptoms? The symptoms are that all of a sudden, in the middle of my work, I'm starting to feel bad about some avera I did when I was 15 years old. Or I'm more thinking about what I did last night. It's not the right time. So if that's the symptom, I know that it's not coming from a place of Kedusha. I know it's coming from a place just to get me down in order to get me in trouble. That's where it's coming from. So recognize the symptoms, see who is setting the agenda in my life. For this we need to establish certain times. And the most appropriate time, when you are able to be like settled. Yeshuva das means you are able to be settled. Like, okay, now is the time. Lihizbainen, to meditate, right? Begedulas Hashem, on the greatness of Hashem. Asher chata lo, which I caused damage to, which I hurt my relationship with, because I did this wrong and that wrong and the other thing wrong and etc., etc., etc. There is a time. That's what we have to recognize. Because there is a goal to have a person's heart that it's broken, that he feels bitter, that he feels like he wants to do things different. He wants to fix himself. The feeling is not a bad feeling. The question is, who is bringing you to this feeling? That's the issue. And so therefore, he says, right? Like it's explained, this time, b'makom acher, in other places, v'sham nisbayer, and over there it explains, gamkin, kimiyad acher shenishbar libo, that immediately after a person's heart is broken, be'esim kvuim, at these specifically fixed times, then right afterwards you have to get rid of your negative feelings, get rid of your bitterness, get rid of your bad thoughts, just push them away completely. V'yamin ve'emuna, and to believe with emuna shlema ki Hashem avir chataso, that Hashem just wipes away the sins, wipes away all the garbage. V'rav lislayach, and for sure He forgives. That's the point. Just wipes it away. That's the idea. Now we could understand, going back to the beginning of chapter 26, what he meant when he said, this is the true happiness that comes after the true upsetness. It works together. But again, I'm doing it in a very calculated manner. There's a time and space for this. And then I approach it and I do it. Okay, so what did we finished chapter 26. Let's just do a quick synopsis. We talked about in the beginning that if things are not going right in my life, right, in terms of my avodas Hashem, it must be because I am not besimcha. I'm not happy. I'm letting things, depression, laziness, heaviness get a hold of me. And then we went on to explain that that is the answer of how to succeed in life, to be besimcha. That's the only way you could succeed in life, right? So then he says, okay, that's very nice. I think we'll all buy into that concept, right? If everyone's happy, we will be much more successful. But there's a problem here. In Olam Hazeh, things don't always go the way I want them to go. So now what? So the first thing he started off by saying is he explained that when things are not going right in the three main areas of our life that we really need brachas in, which is our children, our health, and our salary, our parnasa, we have to look at things from a different perspective. The perspective of where is this coming from? It's coming from the highest levels of the spiritual world. And therefore, gamzu l'taiva, this is for sure for the good. And it's really that I'm closer to Hashem in this way than I would be even in Olam Hazeh. Right? Got it? So that was the eitzah that was given there. Obviously, it's a little bit more than what I just said, but that's the Cliff Note version of it. Then we started off saying, well, what about if instead my depression is because, I pashut sinned. I did bad things in my life. I'm not the big tzaddik that it seems like you're sitting in front of you. Right? So now, that seems like there's a good reason to walk around really depressed because of this. Because look at me. Come on. So he says, the first thing is to know that if you're learning or davening, you have to do it b'simcha. But let's talk about that a little bit later on. He says, when are you depressed? When are you upset? When are you thinking about these sins? If it's during the time of when you're doing business and you're in the world, then for sure it's just a game of the Yetzer Hara. He's trying to trick you to get you to not only be depressed, but then to fall into all different types of desires and nonsense and garbage that you shouldn't be involved in. Instead, a person has to realize that this is an important tool in our arsenal. This idea of spending time at night, thinking about Hashem, thinking about how I want to have a good relationship with Hashem, and thinking about how I've caused a problem to this relationship. And that should cause me to be upset. But once I'm upset about it and I make up in my mind a resolution how I'm going to fix it, so I have to believe that Hashem is a kind Hashem with unbelievable Rahman, his unbelievable compassion, and he wipes away the sin. And now we can have a tremendous simcha of being close to Hashem, closer than we were ever before. And that's the idea.